I'm Dave Wiesdock, Sage of Creative Scaffolding.
And I'm Jenn West, Professional Rebel of Delight.
And this is Shadow Casting. Hey audience, this is another episode of Shadow Casting. Welcome back. Jenn and I are excited to talk to you today about one of my favorite topics, which is silence. See what I did there? A little pause. Okay.
Everybody's cheering now. They're like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this silence podcast. Whoa, yeah.
Oh man. Well, now I feel like there's like expectations of what we need to deliver for this podcast.
There are. I mean, my anxiety went up. So.
Ooh, okay. Well, maybe we need to step into a moment of silence for ourselves so we're not anxious. Audience, if you're listening today, silence is I'm just going to say it's a complex topic. It's a little woo-woo, it's a little concrete, and it's a little in between. Jenn and I are going to do our best today to bring silence as I'll say practice for shadow casting. And hopefully you'll, by the end of this podcast, be able to not only have a loose philosophical understanding of what silence is, but also some practical ways that you can tap into this, I'll call it gift, because silence really is this awesome superpower that people can tap into. And we've been so conditioned to avoid silence. And so this is really going to be a fun ride, I think. There's going to be a lot here that we're going to have to work through. So let's kick it off. I think the best way to talk about silence is that this is not a meditation, right? We're not talking about sitting quietly and focusing on your breathing or doing a body scan or anything like that. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. Silence is where you create space between you and the world. You slow down. And it's this concept of getting out of your head, out of your emotion, out of your whirlwind, and into your body, into the world, into the present moment. And so if you want to really think about it, the present moment has no sound because it just is. The past is full of all our thoughts and stories and everything that we remember. And the future is full of worry, projection, anxiety, stress, and everything that we can't control. Both of those create this kind of like cacophony in your head and divide your attention. But when you're present, there isn't that pull because there's just silence. There just is that moment. So, Jenn, how do you want to kick off talking about silence?
Oh man, silence, like you said, it's a big one. And I think the interesting thing about it is that you're working to get rid of the past and the future for the most part. It's an opportunity to, if a thought arises, it comes from the present moment. It arises out of what your senses bring to you. And you have to be open at the beginning. And really, I think when I started thinking about doing a podcast on silence, I was thinking about getting out. And so the fact that Dave brought up that it's not a meditation, this isn't about being in your house, sitting quietly, not having thoughts, not having sound. You want the sound of life around you. So being out, you could be in a grocery store, you could be in a park watching kids play or playing yourself. You can go on a hike in the forest. It's about having life be loud, but inside of you, be quiet. The thoughts are silent, your body's more relaxed. It's in movement, but the silent of twitching, stress, nuance, what we normally feel, it's going to be really foreign. But I think it's the heartbeat and foundation of magic. If you like magic, if you like superpowers or nerd out like I do, Jedi and all of that, silence is something to cultivate. That ability to relax inside of yourself, relax your thoughts, and be in the world. And that's kind of what I'm interested in this podcast.
I am so glad you brought up superheroes because now I'm going to go on a tangent for 2 minutes and talk about Spider-Man. So I'm sorry, audience, but the OG Spider-Man, like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, is actually a great example of silence because in the third film, yeah, I think it's the third film where Venom shows up. Anyways, in the third film, he gets, for those that don't know, he gets kind of like taken over by like a parasite, like an alien. And it's kind of like his quote unquote villain arc. But the whole reason that this thing happens is Peter Parker is not silent inside at all. Literally everything's falling apart in his life. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a girlfriend or whatever. His friends are gone. He's getting evicted from it. I mean, it is just like one series of bad events after another, like a series of. And so he's really in his head and ruminating about these things. He's in the past. He's in the future. He's not present. And so it opens up this window for this alien to take over for him. And what ends up happening is all of that cacophony of crap ends up empowering this alien and taking over, and he loses control of himself for a while. And so he's behaving and acting and doing all these things that aren't true to who he is. Interestingly enough, he uses sound to get rid of the alien parasite. He goes up in like this church tower and rings the hell out of the church bell in order to like create this vibration that gets rid of the alien parasite. But what happened right before that is he had this second act moment of clarity where he was like, wait a minute, this isn't who I actually am. This isn't who I want to be. This isn't how I want to show up. What do I need to go do? And he doesn't go sit and meditate for 20 minutes and then the parasite goes away. No, he had to go out into the world and actually do something in order to create that silence for him. And again, like I said, he uses sound to do it. But I think that's kind of like what we're talking about here. You're creating an environment to tap back into that silence. And you kind of brought this up too, Jen. You're like creating this intention of going outside, for example, and going on a walk. I think what's really cool about silence is that there is no pre-planning for this. You don't have to schedule this out, right? You can, what's like the opposite of plan? Why can't I think of the word?
Spontaneously.
Thank you. That's exactly the word I was looking for. You can spontaneously go find silence. It can happen at any moment in any day. It's just a choice. But that's why it's a superpower, because all superpowers come with choice. Just like with the Peter Parker example, with great power comes great responsibility. It's not, actually, they did change it around, but it's still the same idea. There's this coupling with choice and power, with responsibility and power. And choice and responsibility, for the sake of the argument, I think are kind of the same thing in this context, right? It's choosing to it's not choosing at that point. It's recognizing that you're not being silent and then making the choice to create space from what you're feeling inside and to tap into the silence within. And I think what Jen was getting at and what I was getting at with the bell is that the world outside of us is loud. It is noisy. And the idea with this silence that we're trying to cast with our own shadow is silence within. We're not trying to silence the world around us. We're trying to bring stillness and silence within.
Yeah. And I'd like to add another story because Peter Parker being infested by a parasite fits right into a story that I was telling Dave before we started recording. I was listening to This American Life. It's a podcast on NPR. And one of the acts, they have 3 acts for each episode that they do. And in this act, the one guy had decided he was going to create a chatbot for himself that would mimic his voice and had all of his information in an attempt to fool his family or telemarketers or something. And he had gone through this entire series of events, and he was finally at the point where he was going to test it on his family. And the chatbot it was good. If you jump into the middle of this podcast, which I made my husband do, it's hard to tell what the bot is at first because it's got a human voice. It's got the guy's voice. Well, he starts using it at the end to contact his family members to test it to see if they can tell. And he is not on the call. The bot calls itself. It does the calling and interacts, and then it hangs up. And at a later time, he listens to the recording of the conversation. So this bot calls all of his family members, and he said that 90% of them, after about a minute, they'd realize they were talking to a bot and be pissed or think it's funny. And then they'd call the real guy whose name is Evan and be like, dude, stop having your bot call me. But one of his friends was super excited and had been texting him because he had met the US soccer team. And this friend knew that Evan, the one who's telling this story, would love it because he's a huge soccer fan too. So they could all just geek out about meeting the soccer team. The bot has been told that they're soccer fans and that the friend had seen the soccer team and to be excited about it. So the bot calls, but the bot's version of being excited can sound sarcastic. So when the friend hears the bot go, "So you saw the US soccer team? That's really awesome." It just does it kind of sarcastically, unintentionally. The friend gets really insecure. He's like, "Yeah, have I been talking about it too much? Yeah, maybe I should. Is it that bad?" And then the bot tries to keep saying it's good. And so he's got like this weird AI feel to it. But
Yeah.
but since the friend is so deeply into it and he thinks he's messed up, he's not catching these markers that he's talking to AI until later because they keep talking. But then the AI is weird. And then he starts to worry about his friend not being healthy because the bot's weird. It's not quite right. It's not human, it's AI. But he's had friends that have had mental breakdowns, both of them, Evan and this guy. And so he starts to worry that Evan, the bot, might be having a mental breakdown and he starts to worry about him. And he's like, "Are you okay?" Bot is like, "Yeah, I'm okay. It's nice that you asked." So it starts to feel like he's having a breakdown, like the bot is playing into it. And the call really makes the friend worry about Evan. And after it's all over, Evan listens to this and it kind of breaks his heart that he hurt his friend. He calls him back. He tells him the friend thinks it's funny after the fact. He's glad Evan isn't losing his mind. But what caught me while I was listening to this story was that when we get into our own heads, we don't see reality. We lose clarity. We start telling ourselves stories for how something makes sense to the world that our internal dialogue is making. So, a weird bot that doesn't sound right because I'm feeling insecure, I think that I did something wrong. Instead of going, "That sounds weird. I don't think it's human." The clarity is lost where all these red flags to tell you that it's a chatbot are missed because of our own insecurity. And I think that plays into our time really deeply now with videos that are AI and with these chatbots that are becoming more developed. Being outside of our own insecurities, getting more clarity in the world, seeing the world as it is, helps us untangle all of that stuff. And I think science gets us there. So, in a really practical way, I think science is something, or not science, silence is something we need to practice. We need to get clear. We need to get outside of ourselves. And so that's what I'm hoping to impart in this episode are ways to become silent, to get clarity, to see reality as it is, not how we want it to be, not how we worry it is. And that's the goal.
It's funny because before we started this episode, you and I were kind of talking about how this might get a little woo-woo into the magicalness of what this can bring. And the longer we're discussing this and I'm really hearing where this is taking us, I actually don't think it's as woo-woo as we thought. Because here's why. Our whole podcast is shadow casting, right? When we did our first episode, we talked about the tree and how it creates a shadow. And so when the light source hits the tree, whatever shape that tree takes is what we see as the shadow. It's not a one-to-one representation, right? The shadow can be malformed or larger or smaller, or based on the surface, it can look weird, all those things. And when I hear that story with the AI bot, that's immediately what comes to my mind. Who was the friend was Evan or the bot was Evan? I forget.
The bot was Evan. The one telling the story was Evan, and the friend, they gave him a name, but I don't remember the friend.
We'll just call him friend. I think if we imagine or put our mind as Evan as the tree, what ended up happening is and this is going to be really crazy, but I would argue that the light source in that case was Evan, right? Because the friend was calling to tell him his excitement and wanting to be kind of shined on with this, share this exuberance with his friend. And as the light source diminished, as he was catching the cues, like you were saying, that something wasn't right, instead of going, wait a minute, I need to check the light source, he started to project his own shadow kind of onto Evan. Because, like you said, they both kind of struggled with this mental health thing. And so Evan went, oh, this is a mental health struggle time, without asking questions, without, as we are talking about, creating that space with that silence and listening. And I think that is magic to people when they don't understand the mechanics of it. And the way that I can best describe this is the reticular activation syndrome
System.
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 And it's this scientific concept where people talk about it all the time. They see a blue Toyota and they talk about a blue Toyota, and then all they see are blue Toyotas. That's that concept. Where your focus goes, energy flows. Where your focus goes is what you're going to see in your life. And that's not magic, that's science.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
because our brain clears out stuff that we're not focused on. It just deletes it in the background. And so we don't notice it, even though it's there, because that's the job. We can't hold it all.
exactly. And so bringing this full circle, that's why I said, I don't know how much this is magic, the true definition of magic, right? It's just something we don't understand. We don't have the science for it yet. The reason I bring this up is I can hear our audience going, okay, I get it. We can project ourselves onto other people. We can take things on internally and create this own venom monster for ourselves. But when we create that, like, why do we need this? Like, what does that create for us? Just like the power of like our priority, our values, having that silence within ourselves creates an opportunity for us to sense what's going on right below the surface for us, that bubbling energy that we might not otherwise be aware of, because sometimes it's just a whisper, right? Great example, when AI really started going crazy and there was that bunny on the trampoline video that pretty much everyone saw, and people were like, whoa, like I didn't know that that was AI at first. As people started to rewatch it, they were like, wait a minute, I've seen bunnies before and I've never seen that many bunnies together. Or wait a minute, how did the bunnies even get on the trampoline? Like they started questioning the video once they realized it was AI. But what was more fascinating is the reflective self-talk. When I saw that, I thought that was a little weird. When I heard Evan talking, I thought he sounded a little weird, right? Like there are cues, there is that whisper of energy. But if we aren't silent, we miss it. That's the benefit, is that it's not really some sort of miracle that things manifest for us when we're silent. It's this maybe less understood process that there's more happening around us. And when we can step out of the rational mind and our senses and step inward and become silent and truly deeply listen, we create our internal reticular activation system where we start to notice trends and patterns that maybe we were missing before.
Yeah.
And this isn't, sorry, one other thing. This isn't a one and done thought. One and done thing either, right? This is a constant process.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing. It's like the silence gets us to that feeling, that gut feeling that's more true to that's a little off. Or that's a little too good to be true. The true skeptic, not the biased skeptic. Just I should look at that again. That's a lot of rabbits, as in the example that Dave has. Or I've gotten in my feed for some reason, wild animals coming up to little kids and cats saving the day, like domesticated cats, like attacking cougars or bears or whatever. And the dog's like hiding, or the parent comes out and goes, oh my God. And when I first saw one, I'm like, that's crazy. But I liked it. So I let it be true that a cat scared off a bear. Yeah, whatever. And then I saw 3 or 4 more and I was like, okay, all of a sudden cats are not protecting. Why are cats protecting 1,000 billion children from animals? And why do we have video of it? The body said, wait. And then the brain could activate and troubleshoot it out. And if we go back to the Evan thing, if we're insecure, we're not going to catch that. Our bias is going to get in the way. We're going to start thinking, why are parents not watching their kids in these dangerous areas? And that's not it. It's just AI. you know and we do that with other people too. We make judgments about people or about things, whether we're cursed or we're blessed. We start telling ourselves stories that aren't real. And when it's not AI meme videos, it's even harder to catch it because we reinforce our story. Where I saw multiple videos of cats saving the day, that triggered my brain to say, hey, wait a minute. But when we make up the story in our own head over and over, it reinforces instead of making us step back. And what the silence does is it brings the inner body quieter and softer. And when our mind is silent for a second, we catch that weird cat saving thing in our own head. We start to see it pop up. And it's no longer a bias that we hold. And the rest of the world is active. And having our thoughts silence out so we can hear the world, we basically switched everything. Normally, we're listening to what we can't hear. We're listening to the thoughts in our head. They're not actually there unless you're one of those people who see pictures or don't hear text in their head. I hear thoughts like narration, but they're
okay, yes.
Yeah. I hear narration like a person talking in my head. Some people don't. So this example's for the people who hear words, hear thoughts. We listen to that, and it's not something that anybody else can hear, so it doesn't exist. We just hear thoughts, but we don't pay attention to what we can actually hear with our ears. So we hear what we can't hear. So what we got to do is we need to turn off the internal thing that's not real in our head and listen outward.
What I hear when you talk about this is it creates that sense of clarity, right? It doesn't matter what it's around or about, it's you get clarity. And the stories that we create and the thoughts that happen in our head, and in my very minimal understanding of how people have different like thought patterns and stuff, I don't think it so much matters even if someone sees a picture. I mean, my guess is then if they see a picture of an apple and then they see a picture of a tree and then they grass and then they're thinking about, I don't know, what they're eating for dinner tonight. I could still see how that could create that kind of cascading effect.
Yeah, they got more of the movie I do that too. I've got it, both of them where I'm out jogging or something and I create the story of the scary things attacking me or something. So it's same thing. It's not thoughts anymore. It's the movie of the horrible thing that's going to happen.
But that's just what you said is just what I was getting at. And that's exactly, it's not thoughts anymore. What happens is we create something out of the thought. A lot of the like spiritual people that I've followed and even more pragmatic people constantly say, you are not your thoughts. I do believe that's true. I think what ends up happening is we personalize the thoughts and we create story around the thoughts. We create connections and correlations. And so we therefore become the thought in a lot of ways. And we've talked about this in previous quote casts and podcasts about how your thoughts become your words become your actions, and your actions becomes your destiny. And so I think in a really big way, when you tap into silence, we're at the precipice of that. We've even gone a step further back before thoughts.
Yeah, we're breaking the pattern.
Yes, exactly. And with breaking that pattern comes the clarity to be like, I don't trust that person, or that didn't sound like my best friend on the phone. Maybe I need to, figure out what's going on. Because really, at the end of the day, that story could have gone a whole different way, right? Maybe Evan was having a mental health crisis, and that was really good on his friend to recognize those cues and act and check in, right? Like that story could have been written totally different, but because it was AI, it came through this other lens. And so I think that that's why silence is so important, because it at least creates the space for us to kind of make choices and to listen. I don't want to assume like the thought process is of his friend, but it kind of, from the story you shared, it kind of sounds like he went through from start to finish, right? He was in his thoughts, he was in the world, and he was excited about the soccer game or the football game. And then he called his friend and he was in the world. And as he started to listen to his friend and kind of shrink down to the new interaction he was having, that's when the red flags started to go off for him. But the problem is he didn't stop there and go to the silence. He went immediately into that cascading effect. He went to the thought of, my friend's not doing good, to the words of, are you okay, to the action of texting him. And you can kind of see how just one thought created this cascading effect. And while that's an oversimplification, that's exactly what I think we do. There is magic in that clarity because we would do things that we otherwise might not have done had we not been silent and just stopped for a second.
Yeah. Yeah. And just bringing this to our audience, the audience hopefully has gotten to a part where it's like, okay, silence, important, clarity, important. How do I get there? What is the point of all of this? I've got this abstract, but how do I get into it? And we've talked about it before in other podcasts, talking about even when we did play mindset, the beginning of becoming present. There are a lot of action steps in that podcast, but it really is a practice of pausing. As you're ruminating, take a break and be like, hold on. And you can do these things by taking a bubble bath, which is not my favorite because it's still in your house. It's still silent, still can let your mind ruminate. But going out for a walk, going out and people watch, that's a really good one. Just sit and watch what people are doing, but don't make up a story about what they're doing or why. Just kind of sit with it. Or if you do want to make up a story, make up 3 for the same person. 3 radically different for why they're doing what they're doing, because your initial one might tell you something about yourself and what's going on for you. That story you make up.
When we were talking about doing this podcast for the audience listening, there was this cool experiment that I did. And I think that's where Jen was going at with this, where I spontaneously, just to borrow the word that apparently wants to be on my brain today, decided to try an experiment where I wanted to create as much sensory deprivation as possible. And so what I did is I ran a bath and, no music, nothing, no social media, no phones, no computer, no iPad, and just tried to sit in the maddening silence. And I think that's why I agree with Jen about going out into the world and finding it. Because when you silence the outside and the inside world, that silence is deafening. Like that's not even what I think we're trying to get at with this podcast, to be completely honest. But I share it because I could see our audience trying to kind of go that route already. Like, okay, how do I create as much silence as possible? And I think part of this is that it's not just creating silence within, it's creating connection without, like outside of yourself.
100%.
Yeah, because it's like you've got to like ground a bit. And when I did this sensory deprivation exercise, I was almost taking the grounding out of it. There was like, it was almost like being in like a void. Like there was no stimulation. Like I had the lights off, like every possible way I could reduce sensory input, I did. And the problem,
that makes the system extremely twitchy if you don't already have a meditation practice. It's the worst feeling in the world, and the brain starts coming up with anything to get you out of it.
And that's what I was trying to get at. And thank you for directing that, because yes, the problem was when I sat in that silence, my brain would not stop. It could not stop. I honestly don't think it could stop. But when you are creating silence within and you go to the outside world, it does something to the brain that allows it to breathe itself. And I don't know that I have all the understanding behind it, but I think that's why I want to reiterate for our audience that it's really, really important to just tap into this silence and what we're talking about, that there is an actionable component that is taking you outside of your bubble a bit.
Yeah. And it's super useful too, because it can engage your mind in a new way. So here's kind of a woo-woo yet practical tool. And it's where silence originally came to me. I was listening to another podcast, because I listen to a ton of them, by Tim Ferriss. And he was interviewing a tracker, Boyd Vardy. And he was talking about how he started to believe in the woo woo of the world because animals would start interacting with the groups that he would take out on safaris in really weird, serendipitous ways that didn't make any sense and they'd never done with anybody else. Just this person went out, had this intention, and then the animal reflected it. And it's weird. It's woo woo. It doesn't make sense. But I think it just has to do with patterns we can't tell, energies that we put out that the world reflects back to us. And we're just not clear on it. So that's kind of where I sit with the idea. But my training in Gestalt was equine Gestalt coaching. So partnering with horses to help heal people. And the horses do crazy things with the clients that I cannot explain. They just sense something, they see something, they give that client exactly what they need in the moment. And it starts with an intention that's kind of brought through the coaching. And I've had this in just weird ways myself. I was having a conversation with some people from our Gestalt training afterwards, and we're sitting out talking, and I'm telling a story about how I keep trying to do these things. And I jump and then I hit a wall and I fall off and I jump and I try to create something and I hit a wall and fall. And I look down and there's a grasshopper and it's jumping on the chair and like hitting the chair and then bouncing back down. And it does it like 5 or 6 times. Like it's jumping, hitting, falling, jumping, hitting, falling. And I'm like, that's exactly how I feel. Just like that grasshopper. And it was like nature acknowledging what I was focused on and gave it a very physical representation. And being able to look at the grasshopper, I could see what it could do different, how the grasshopper was wasting energy with what it was doing, the way it was hopping, what it was trying to cling onto was not a surface it could grab. And it gave just a little bit of breath, a little bit of opening for something new for me to consider. And I find that fascinating. And it came from being in the world. The grass, you have to actively engage your world, whether it be a fly, grasshopper, your dog, whatever, other people, they're going to give you that information. It's going to be that RAS is going to happen in weird ways by going silent, by putting an attention into the world and then being in the world.
And I think I just want to end with this kind of thought too, of piggybacking off of what you just said, that I don't know that we would have done a podcast on silence 50 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. I really think that this is a podcast of the times. We're constantly overstimulated and constantly receiving sensory input. And so silence is something that was, I think, taken for granted before. And so we don't really have the mechanisms in place to cultivate it now. And I think that's one of the reasons that I find specifically this topic so profound for us to be talking about on shadow casting. Because, with the COVID pandemic back in 2020, we all self-isolated for the protection of our health, which was good, but it lingered for so long that I think it created a environment of disconnection. And unironically, with that disconnection, we actually got less silent, because instead of getting disconnected and connecting with ourselves, we all got disconnected, had a moment of panic, and turned to ways that we could still connect. And I think there's a lot of gifts that came out of that. We figured out how to connect with the world virtually through like Zoom calls and live feed videos and those kind of things. But in a bigger sense, it just created more input for us to disseminate and to go through. And so it actually ended up creating less silence and more disconnection. So this is a challenge. This is a challenge. I think that this is a really challenging, one of the more challenging concepts, not only to discuss, like Jen and I were talking about, it's a bit woo-woo, it's a bit practical, it's a bit of a mix, but also in a really big sense, it's challenging to talk about because this isn't, at least for me, it's not an intuitive thing to go to. And so what I have found is trying to do this as much as I can throughout my day, not even realizing up until this point that that's exactly what I've been doing. When I'm in that 2 p.m., 3 p.m. slump in the middle of my week, that tends to be where my thoughts go the craziest. And so I have found over time that I just kind of practice catching my thoughts, catching myself, and trying to create moments of space and then celebrating when I do, like really celebrating it, mentally, internally, being like, yes, I caught it. Like I paused, I stopped. Maybe I didn't do the action that I wanted to do. Maybe I didn't act on the clarity that I just got, but I did pause. And it's those baby steps and that incremental work. And I think that's where the magic comes from too, because it's not something that happens overnight, but the more you practice it and the more you bring yourself into the world, back into the world, I think that allows silence to have a more profound effect in your life.
100%. Yeah. So for the audience, I would suggest when you're out with friends, focus on listening and hearing instead of how you'll respond. That's a good way to practice silence because if your head isn't running, you're actually taking them in and you can pay attention to more than just their words. You can pay attention to their body language. You can pay attention to the intonation or space between their words. That's one thing just with friends. Go out and take that walk. If you're stressed, and it'll be uncomfortable. It'll be uncomfortable at first, not letting your thoughts take over. You'll hear from your ego that it's boring, that there's nothing new. It's the same walk you've taken every day. And just this is not important. I need to get back to the job. Whatever thoughts want to crop up. And it's to go, thank you, and clip it. Just let that thought go away.
Intention is really important here too, on that note, because your ego can also go, okay, I was silent. Now let's go back to my day. Just like you were saying there at the end. Because I've had those thoughts too, where I'm like, oh, I was silent. Good for me. And then like I instantly go back to not being silent. That's not the silent practice either. It needs to be intent based. So I'm going on a 15-minute walk and I'm going to practice silence.
Yeah. Set a timer so that it catches you, so that it bings or something every 3 minutes. So you're like,
that's a great example. Yeah.
I think that's it.
The challenge for our audience. Find a way to set an intention to bring silence so it's not spontaneous into your week and test it for a week. See how it goes. Set a timer so that you have a way to check in every few minutes as you do this practice. And let's know how it goes.
Yeah. Test out silence. Do you like it? Is it uncomfortable? Did you get an aha? We would love to hear about it.
Oh, I love the ahas. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening from. Drop us a like. Let us know how the silence treatment went for the week that you chose for the challenge. Share us out with your friends and family. And until next time.
See ya.